Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, as you know from the save, I'm the expert at rotating the squad. Not really, but I'll give you an idea of sort of what's been happening and how things have been working here for us here at PanSa East FC. We'll take a little look real quick here at the schedule. As you know, if you've been paying attention, we've had a whole bunch of weeks here with 2 games a week. Makes it a little bit tricky, especially if you don't have a whole ton of players. And at this point in time in the save, we don't have a lot. Once we finish the season and get some of these free transfers in, we should be doing a little bit better. We're lucky we just had a week off, and then we have another week off after that, and then there's another full week after that, another week after that. We're probably going to beat Utile in tomorrow's match, and that'll end up clinching the season, and so the rest of it won't really matter so much from there. So what does this have to do with squad rotation? Well, I mean, if we go over here to tactics, not to dynamics, we'll go take a look real quick and sort of see what's happening. So we'll auto-size all the columns and take a look and see what our starts look like. It's pretty simple, honestly. I've been trying to rotate guys in and out as much as I possibly can, with the exception of the goalkeepers. We've been sort of blessed in disguise by the fact that we have a bunch of players who are suspended or who are injured and who therefore are completely incapable of playing. We're also lucky that we have some guys who can play in multiple positions, or in some cases kind of have to, say for Atu in tomorrow's game, assuming that I actually keep him here. I think that I probably have to. I could put PanSa Gray in here. So basically, that's sort of the thing that we do, right? The way that you want to rotate when you're in this kind of position is you want to think about 2 different things. The first thing you want to think about is your competition, right? So you go over to competitions. You'll look at the beginning of the season, it'll be kind of harder to figure this out. When you're this far into the season, you can see pretty quickly, oh, we're playing the 10th place team. We can put like whoever we want out there, right, and give some of the regulars a chance to rest. But if you're not at the end of the season, if you're at the beginning, you go over to season preview, you can take a quick look at where you are and where the opposition's supposed to be and kind of guess and say, okay, this is a difficult team or this is not such a difficult team. And, if they're not such a hard team, then maybe you let some of these guys like Maile have the day off and instead go for somebody else who hasn't played yet. You can tell that by this number right here, number of appearances. I mean, it might look different depending upon what your format is or whatever. This, I think, is just the default one with the game, I guess. I can't remember what I've done. So you can look over and see how many appearances the guy have. Other thing you can look at here is match load, and this will give you an idea. Match load is usually, I think it's the matches from the past 2 weeks, I think it is, whether it's heavy, medium, or light. In prior saves, I would always try to keep this as light or medium for every single player in every position. I haven't really cared about that too much in this save because I know that the gap between our good players and our bad players is like really, really big. And so especially for for difficult matches, we want to make sure that we have some good players in there. And also the other thing I'll say is that in my experience, that match load is not necessarily that important when it comes to figuring out if someone's going to get injured or be way too tired or not. Probably better looking here at the condition. You can also look at match sharpness if you want, and that'll tell you a little bit about it, though I think match sharpness has more to do with the number of games they've started than with anything else. Anyway, that's basically what I do to try to rotate. Again, with goalkeepers, it's not really that important. I would say if you have 2 goalkeepers who are young, who are like equally good, then yeah, you do want to rotate. If you don't have that kind of situation, though, I mean, who really cares? If there's like a huge gap between them, you don't need to rotate them. It's not really that big of a deal. I mean, they're not going to get that tired, The rest of your players, though, you do definitely want to keep track of this. You also want to keep track of your tactical intensity, and stuff like that as you go forward. Usually, for the most part, you can take what your assistant manager's advice is and use that. However, I will warn you that it's important to look again at what the standings are and make sure that you're not making some strange decision and putting a whole bunch of not so great players into the starting positions, because if you start doing that, you might start losing matches that you otherwise really should have won. You don't want to do a whole lot of that. My recommendation is, kind of keep it this way and make sure that you have a system that sort of works for you. For the most part, once you get, I would say probably about, 6, 7, maybe 8 games into the season, you'll have an idea of who your starters are, and you'll know which players they are that you normally start, and then you just sort of rotate guys in and out. Ideally, if we had, if we were in a more professional league, I would be thinking, okay, I want to make sure I've got a starter who's like, in his early 20s, mid 20s, something like that, and then have a young guy who I want to give some additional playing time to, and then maybe have like a wonder kid, or maybe even a guy guy in his 30s, mid-30s or something like that who comes on once in a blue moon, right? And then, like I said before, it's going to depend upon what your schedule is looking like. Again, if you're in a league that has 2 matches per week and you have enough players to do it, you're probably going to want to rotate like everybody in and out as much as possible. If you're in a league with only 1 match a week, you don't have to worry about continental competition or anything like that. You might be a little bit more lazy about that. Play your first team players a little bit more frequently, and things will be okay. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, is we'll look at Maele for this, is how much playing time you've promised the player. So when it comes to Maele, I mean, of course, shouldn't be a squad player. He should probably be a star player given the way he's been playing for the club. But it's okay. If you're playing him more frequently than the agreed playing time is, he's not going to be upset with that. What you want to watch out for and you want to look at every once in a while is if you're not playing the player as frequently as you promised. That will happen. That happens to everybody in every save. You want to watch out for those situations because that's where you get players really upset with you. When you go over here to change the agreed playing time, you can get the player really, really upset. But you can also make it so that in the future they might not get as upset without and catch you off guard as they would otherwise, right? So if you just ignore it and don't look at it at all, you'll wind up one day with a guy getting really mad at you and start screaming at you and demand to be sold to another team. Don't necessarily want to do that. You can also think about it strategically when you go over here to your dynamics and your hierarchy, right? If you have a guy like Kaleopa, I don't even know what I've been telling him. Yeah, agreed playing time, fringe player, actual playing time, emergency backup. He might get upset with me. Reason why we have to be careful with him is because he's highly influential. So if Kaleopa ends up getting really upset that he's not playing enough, he might have some of these other players who are not as influential go along with him and agree with him. And if you get the entire squad agreeing with a player who's very influential, then you're really in trouble, right? Fortunate thing is, since we're on an amateur team, we can take Kaleopa and just release him if this sort of thing happens. It will cause some damage to squad dynamics overall, but it won't be as bad as if this guy got really upset because he's not playing, right? So, I mean, it's the sort of calculation that you make when you take a look at this, right? Sometimes, you really want to make sure that you do everything you can to make these influential players happy, even if it means playing them more often than you really should, right? But most of the time, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Most of the time, your more influential players are going to be guys who are already playing pretty frequently, and so it will sort of fit in naturally. Anyway, that's sort of the way that it is. Honestly, I don't spend too much time worrying about the dynamic aspect. But then again, in prior saves, that has hurt me. What you really want to make sure of, though, is that you're not starting a whole bunch of guys who are completely tired or who are only going to give you half the match and they're going to give you some problems while the match is going on. You want to make sure that you rotate, especially, like I said, 2 matches per week. You'll want to rotate a little bit more often than you would otherwise. Right, and you'll be okay. I mean, Maele, for example, he's played 12 starts and 2 substitutions. That's out of, what have we played, 16 matches, right? So, I mean, he's played not every match, just about every match, though, and he's leading the league in goals scored, and so he's doing pretty well and is probably pretty happy with the amount that he's playing, and yet we don't have to necessarily start him in every game, right? We have other players who we can start from time to time. Probably when we get, let's look at that schedule again, when we get past this game and into these 3, I probably will just not start him that much anymore because he's not going to demand the starts. And instead, that will be the time for us to go over to, where are you? To Kaleopa, here you are, and give him a little bit more playing time and hope that when it comes to this happiness, we can make him a little bit happier. Anyway, that's one of the things you got to learn about this, right? So in Football Manager, you can kind of cheat the system a little bit, right? The players in game do not know that you're only playing them in unimportant matches, right? There is such a thing in Football Manager as big matches and small matches, and it's something that you can't really see. But when it comes to this stuff and playing time, the player's not going to care. If you're playing them in matches that you really don't care about or matches you're probably going to win anyway, I mean, they're not going to know. They're not going to get upset or start rebelling against you because they're playing in the wrong matches, right? So, I mean, as you play the game and as you learn more about how this stuff works, you find out that there are little cheats and little sort of secret things you can do to make sure that the players are happy with the amount of time that they're being given, and yet to also make sure that you're not putting out a team that's just completely awful. And if push comes to shove, right, if you have a player who's just awful, who's demanding tons of playing time time and is on high wages, you can try to sell him. If all else fails, you can put him out for loan. Sometimes it's better to put a player like that out for loan, even if you can't get any money and you have to eat the guy's contract, because once he's gone, then he can't have a poor or disruptive influence on the squad. So you always have to watch out for those situations. And that's one of the reasons why we say that going on to a team that's like picked to finish last place or whatever and has a whole bunch of players like that is a lot harder than playing one of these amateur teams where you can do basically whatever it is you want. Anyway, there you have it. And that's sort of the way that at least I approach squad balance and trying to get playing time for all the players. It's an important part of the game, and I recommend giving it your try, messing around with it, and seeing what happens. Talk to you later. Bye.